Welcome to Season 2 of the Let's Talk podcast hosted by WellHouse Church, where we talk about what it's like to be a Christian Monday through Saturday, to be a person of faith in a culture against faith.
So let's talk about what the average Christian can do to fight against injustice and also promote justice.
There you go. Well, I will say, before we get into this conversation, the first step in any fight for anything is awareness.
Yeah.
Like bringing awareness to the issue of why there's a problem to fight.
Mm-hmm.
So conversations, respectful conversations are the first piece.
Yep.
But outside of that premise, Clayton, how can the average person fight against injustice?
Not just talk about the issue, but speak directly against the issue.
Okay, so it's cool. So what I hear in that is don't not be a racist, be actively anti-racism.
Adam Cheney.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah, exactly
Shout out to my boy.
Exactly that. It is one thing to be like, oh no, this is a terrible problem that our police force is shooting black kids.
Yeah. Dang.
It is a totally different
You went
thing.
there.
I did, because is that not a perfect example in
it's
a
great
modern
example.
context
It's a great
of
example.
injustice?
It's a great example.
It is one thing to say that is a bad thing.
Yeah.
It is a totally different thing to actively speak against it.
Yeah. For sure.
If we expected Jesus to be like, oh no, this is terrible, where do we get the direct attacks against the oppressors from Jesus? You know what I mean?
Yeah. What else can
Those are two different things.
Yeah. What else can the average person do to fight against injustice?
Pick up the slack.
In what way?
In the way that oppressors are leaving a gap in society. A group of people that are not taken care of in some way, shape, or form.
Okay. And so how does the average person take care of those people?
The average person, the average Christian, could step in and fill that gap, whatever that gap is.
Can you name a few of those gaps?
Sure.
And tell me how the average Christian could answer that.
Or at least participate. Maybe you can't fill the gap wholly yourself.
Correct.
But attempt to fill the gap. Homeless people. Right? $1. Whatever you have in your wallet. A meal, pillow, blanket. Meeting a need that is had. Providing space for traumatized individuals, a safe space for traumatized individuals, whatever that looks like, whatever that means, you have a safe space here. Being a true ally in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
So this is a thing that a person would say, not saying that this is me. I am a traumatized black male. Will you hear my voice? You better say yes, Christian.
Yeah.
You better say yes.
Attaboy. Yeah. That. Yeah, you better say yes, Christian.
You better say yes.
You better say yes, Christian. Abso-freaking-lutely.
That is meeting a need.
Yeah.
The sick, the vulnerable, sitting with them in their sickness. If you can, providing funds. If you can afford this, providing funds for treatment. Prayer, right? That is biblical. In ways that you can fight injustice. Truly just caring for the people who need it. In every way that means meeting the need that people come to you with. every need, a true need, not a want, a true need that anybody comes to you with, I am convinced is a product of injustice and oppression. If you have a true need that is not being met by society, you have not been given the means to meet this need, is some way a product of oppression and injustice.
I disagree.
Really?
Yeah, because you used an all-inclusive. Had you not used an all-inclusive, I would agree with everything you said. But I can give you an example of when I would not agree with you.
What is that?
Someone who won the lottery, and I only use this because this is statistically the majority of people. They win the lottery, spend it all, and end up with nothing, living back in the same conditions they were in. If you started in one of those oppressed places and that was what was given to you and you ended up back there, which unfortunately is a far too common occurrence, I don't agree with you.
Fair enough. That is a fair point.
But that's an exception to the rule.
Yeah.
Had he not used all-inclusive, I would agree to 1,000%.
In most situations, if there is a need that is not being met, it is a product of oppression and injustice.
Yeah.
And if anybody comes to you with that need, you, Christian, as a little Christ, a person of Jesus, should be willing to meet it.
I agree.
Maybe you cannot by yourself meet it, but you can get people who can. You can work as a collective. You can refer them to people who can.
Yeah. So let me put this into a new perspective for you. The average person in America, more than almost 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck.
Yes.
Less than half Americans have $1,000 in savings. Only like 30% of Americans that are of age and in the workforce are invested in the stock market regularly. That tells me that we have a society that doesn't have expendable income. So giving the dollar to the homeless dude, that's not an actual solution.
Yeah. Agreed.
So what in this, when Clayton and I were designing this final episode, one of the things that we kept saying is like, how does the average, we've given a lot of information to you about injustice and had a lot of different conversations about injustice, but what does the average person take away from what do I do as a person who wants to fight against injustice? And this is not true for our foreign listeners, which we do have a lot of foreign listeners on this podcast. For Americans, it's your vote.
Yeah.
Every single person has a vote. And I know lots of people don't feel like it matters and all of those things. It's just simply not true because your vote is your voice. Go register to vote. Go actually vote. That is a way that you have a voice, and however you have chosen. This is not a political podcast, and so we talk about politics on here, but I'm not going to make this political. However you make up the conversation of injustice, based on all the conversations we've had and how you view the world and what the Holy Spirit is communicating to you, how you're experiencing the divine in these conversations of injustice, all of those myriad of things put together, you should be able to look at the way that you view injustice and go vote for something that fights against that.
So let me just go ahead and say what you're trying to say, just very broadly. Your perspective on the world, on the Bible, on Christianity, you Christian, your theology should define your politics, not the other way around.
Well, I wasn't going to say that because I wasn't going to make this a political thing. But
No. But you went the political route.
Well, only because that is something that every person has. Because anytime you use the money argument, it's always easy for people. And I want to take that back. It's not easy unfortunately, it's used as a cop-out, and that's
Right.
why I'm against it. But it is true that most people are not going to give that person money because
Right.
they feel like they're barely keeping their own head above water.
Yeah.
Income is not the thing that they have to help.
That is true.
The vote is something everybody has to help.
Yeah.
But if we take it down the political route, that's not necessarily what I was saying. I do believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But more so what I was communicating is if we were going to take it down the political route, what I would want to communicate is that I don't think that you should like create a dualism within yourself for this like separation of church and state. You're a whole person.
Yep.
You view the world one way. And if your faith is not impacting the way you view the world, then that's real problematic about like what it says about your faith and how committed you are to a faith. And so like when you go vote, take that to the voting booth. Like
Yeah.
let's stop this like mirage that we're not already doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like do that and don't be afraid to do that. Your faith should dictate and help shape the way in which you view the world. And injustice is a like problem that the Bible historically, especially through the prophets, is extremely concerned with. And one of the things I love is God, like if you're going to have a conversation about politics and the way in which God wanted politics to be done, God wanted a theocracy.
Mm-hmm.
God wanted people of prayer, a council of people of prayer, some judges, a whole lot of different things going on for God to govern the people.
Yeah.
So that God could help have voice in protecting the vulnerable.
Yep.
The people chose not to have that in the Bible, and they wanted a king, a single solitary leader of power, the thing that God was, but they wanted a human version, a fallen version of that, a version of that which I'm told in Genesis 3, in Genesis 9, and in Genesis 11 is all a very, very bad idea. So much so that God reverses it in Genesis 12, and instead of it being one person who pursues power, it's one man who creates lots.
Mm-hmm.
They want a king. Then we get Jesus, our king, right? This humility, this suffering king. I think if you were ever going to have a human rule that wasn't a theocracy, the one that God might be most satisfied with is a democracy, because it gives everybody voice. You get the opportunity to have your faith show up in your voice in fighting against injustice, which because government is like the controller of injustice. Like macro institution, empire is the controller of injustice. So whether you want to believe it or not, we have something to say. The people in the Bible would have loved a democracy. You know why? Because they could have used their voice in a way that was meaningful to stop their own persecution.
Yeah.
They weren't given that. We are. If you want to be a person who fights against injustice, the most important thing you can do is vote. However you view the world, Republican, Democrat, Independent, I don't care. However you view the world, the most important thing you can do as a person and any person, go vote. Register to vote and go vote.
Agreed. I also want to point out that as a Christian who should be angered by the injustice in the world, not to forget Jesus' words at the end of his life on the cross, Lord, forgive them for they know not what they do.
Ooh.
Still providing space and grace for the oppressors. Not accepting it, not saying that's a good thing, but when you start excluding them from salvation and from from the gospel and from pursuit of divine likeness, you become no better than them.
I agree with you.
I will all day speak out, and very strongly at that. Because Jesus speaks out and very strongly against that, but never once excludes them from grace.
I agree. So what's another way someone can fight against injustice, the average person? Well, it's not the average person, but we shouldn't pass over the way in which you use expendable income. Like, if you
Fair
are
enough.
privileged enough to have that, we would be remiss if we didn't bring up that you have a plethora of options about how to leverage that money, that income, for fighting against injustice.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how you view the world, there are lots of injustices that you think could exist.
Yep.
And you can utilize your money to fight against those injustices.
And let's not be naive here. It is required to have money to fight injustice because injustice has money. In our current society, it is important to have the proper funds to fight injustice because injustice has money.
You know, I want to push back on you, but I'm just not sure I have enough ammo to do it at all.
It is harder for a rich man to get into heaven
Yeah.
than a camel to get through the eye of the needle.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. I wish it wasn't that way.
I wish it wasn't
really
either.
wish it wasn't that way.
But it is.
I want to believe that our society is capable enough that I can say, no, the First Amendment. Like, my voice should be enough.
It's just not.
It's just not, unfortunately.
In order to fight fire with fire,
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
That's why nonprofits can't get anywhere
Well,
without money.
yeah. Well, be careful. Yeah. Well, nonprofits. There's a lot of ways to be a nonprofit.
Sure.
Hospitals are nonprofits.
Okay.
They don't have a problem coming up with money.
Nonprofit anti-injustice, like against injustice, just full organizations. People fighting the good fight cannot do anything without a decent budget.
Not unless you have a talent.
Yeah.
A talent that you're willing to volunteer, which this is what I will say is like the final thing you have. In the same way that a lot of people don't have the commodity of money, there's a lot of people that have the commodity of money that don't have the commodity of time. And then vice versa, there's a lot of people that don't have the commodity of money but have the commodity of time. If you are a person that has the commodity of time available and you have a talent, I don't care what that talent is, you can utilize that talent to fight against injustice. If you are a poet, you can write poetry to fight against injustice.
Yep.
In a social media age, a good poetic clip on injustice with the right hashtags could go viral at any moment. If you are an artist, everybody loves admiring graphics that speak against injustice. If you can cook, there are a ton of food pantries and shelters that would love to have you volunteer your time. If you are a medical professional, I need not tell you the ways in which you might be of use.
Yeah.
School teachers, tutoring. I mean, my gosh, the talents are endless. music teachers, if you are a person of talents, any talent, whatever talent, if you are a person of talents, you can give those talents to the fight against injustice.
Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk podcast hosted by WellHouse Church. Be sure to give us a rating and a review if you enjoyed the episode. It's free and it helps us immensely. Also, feel free to check out our other podcasts.